My name is Jake Morrison. Yes, same last name as the villain of this story. Pure coincidence that made everything even more awkward. And I'm a 34-year-old software engineer specializing in smart home automation and IoT systems. After years of grinding in Silicon Valley, saving every penny and living in cramped apartments where I could hear my neighbors' every sneeze, I finally had enough money to buy my dream home. Sunset Ridge seemed perfect. It was an upscale, planned community about 40 minutes outside the city, with manicured lawns, tree-lined streets, and houses that actually had space between them. The HOA promised community standards, peaceful living, and preservation of property values. What sold me on the specific house was the backyard, a gorgeous kidney-shaped pool with a built-in spa surrounded by mature oak trees and a privacy fence that I thought would guarantee my solitude. I closed on the house in March and spent the first few weeks setting up my home office, installing my extensive smart home system, and planning how I'd transform the backyard into my personal paradise. I had visions of floating on pool loungers while working remotely, hosting small gatherings with actual friends, and finally having a space that was truly mine. The pool became my obsession in the best way. I researched the perfect chemical balance, invested in a high-end filtration system, and even installed underwater LED lights that could change colors based on my mood or the time of day. I bought quality pool furniture, a professional-grade outdoor sound system, and turned the pool shed into a fully equipped pool house with a mini fridge, towels, and all the supplies I'd need. Then Karen Morrison entered my life like a hurricane of entitlement and ruined everything. The first incident happened on a Saturday morning in late April. I was working from my home office debugging a particularly frustrating piece of code when I heard voices and splashing coming from my backyard. At first, I thought maybe kids had gotten into my yard somehow, but the voices sounded like adults. I looked out my office window and nearly choked on my coffee. There were 6 people in my pool, 6 complete strangers lounging around like they owned the place. They'd brought their own floaties, set up what appeared to be a full bar on my patio table, and were playing music from a Bluetooth speaker that was definitely louder than HOA noise ordinances allowed. The ringleader was immediately obvious. A blonde woman in her 50s wearing a leopard print bikini that was about 2 decades too young for her, oversized sunglasses, and an attitude that radiated entitlement from 50 yards away. She was holding court from a ridiculous inflatable throne, a golden swan that was taking up half my pool, while directing the other trespassers like she was running a resort. I threw on clothes and stormed outside, my heart pounding with a mixture of confusion and rage. "Excuse me! What the hell do you think you're doing?" The blonde woman turned toward me with the most condescending smile I'd ever seen, like I was a child who'd interrupted adult conversation. "Oh, you must be the new neighbor. How wonderful to finally meet you. I'm Karen Morrison, president of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association. We're just enjoying some community time at one of our neighborhood amenities." I stared at her in disbelief. Community amenities? This is my pool on my property. You're trespassing. Karen laughed, actually threw her head back and laughed like I'd told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. The other people in my pool joined in with nervous chuckles, clearly taking their cues from her. "Oh, honey," she said in a tone dripping with fake sweetness. "I can see there's been some confusion. Let me clear this up for you." She reached for a waterproof folder that had been floating next to her golden swan and pulled out what appeared to be an official document. According to HOA Bylaws Section 47B, Subsection 12, all recreational facilities within the community boundaries are subject to shared use policies during designated community recreation hours. That's weekends from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and selected weekdays during summer months. She handed me the document with a triumphant smirk. "I know it's a lot to take in for someone new to planned community living, but we've found that sharing our resources really builds neighborhood unity." I snatched the paper from her manicured fingers and read it quickly. It was formatted to look official with fancy letterhead and legal-sounding language, but it was obvious bullshit. The document essentially claimed that any homeowner could use any pool, hot tub, or water feature in the neighborhood during specified hours, as long as they gave reasonable notice to the property owner. "This is fake," I said flatly. "This is completely made up." Karen's smile never wavered. "I'll have you know I've been president of this HOA for 12 years, young man. I helped write these bylaws personally. I think I know our community rules better than someone who's lived here for 5 minutes. The other trespassers nodded and murmured agreement. One middle-aged guy in swim trunks that were comically too small for his beer gut actually had the audacity to raise his hand like he was in a classroom. "Excuse me, Jake, is it? Do you happen to have any beer in your fridge? We're running low over here, and according to the Good Neighbor Clause in Section 23A, community members are encouraged to share refreshments during social gatherings." I was speechless. In my 34 years on this planet, I had never encountered such brazen, shameless entitlement. These people weren't just trespassing, they were acting like I was the unreasonable one for objecting to their presence. "Get out!" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "All of you, get out of my pool and off my property right now, or I'm calling the police." Karen sighed dramatically and exchanged knowing looks with her followers. "Well, that's disappointing. I had hoped our new neighbor would be more community-minded. But don't worry, honey, we'll be gone by 6 p.m. as per the bylaws. We're not here to cause trouble." "You're causing trouble by being here at all. This is private property." Now, Karen said, waving her hand dismissively. "No need to get hysterical. We're all adults here. Why don't you go back inside, maybe make yourself a nice cup of tea, and we'll clean up everything before we leave. You won't even know we were here." That's when I called 911. Officer Martinez arrived 25 minutes later, by which time Karen's group had strategically repositioned themselves to look like they were just having a friendly conversation by the pool rather than actively swimming. Karen had somehow produced a clipboard and was pretending to take notes, as if they were conducting official HOA business. "Officer," Karen said before I could even speak, "thank goodness you're here. We're having a bit of a communication issue with our new neighbor. I'm Karen Morrison, HOA president, and I was just explaining our community sharing policies to Jake here. I think there's been some confusion about property usage rights." She handed Officer Martinez the fake document with complete confidence. He read it carefully, his expression growing more skeptical with each paragraph. "Ma'am," he said finally, "this document has no legal standing. HOA bylaws can't supersede private property rights. If the homeowner wants you to leave, you need to leave." Karen's confidence flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I'm sure there's just been some miscommunication. We're not trying to cause any problems. We were actually just finishing up our community meeting and heading home anyway." As if on cue, the other trespassers began gathering their things with practiced efficiency. They clearly had experience with quick exits. Officer Martinez took my statement and Karen's information, but explained that since they were already leaving and claimed it was all a misunderstanding, there wasn't much he could do except file a report and issue a verbal warning. "My advice," he told me quietly while Karen was packing up her golden swan, "is to install security cameras and document everything. If this happens again, call us immediately while they're still on your property." After everyone left, I spent the rest of the day researching HOA laws and calling my lawyer friend David, who specialized in property rights. He confirmed that Karen's document was not only fake, but potentially illegal, and that no HOA had the authority to grant access to private pools. I ordered a comprehensive security system that night. 4 4K cameras with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage. I also researched pool security systems and began formulating a plan that would ensure Karen never bothered me again. I thought maybe the police visit had scared her off. I was wrong. The following Saturday, I woke up to the sound of a blender, Jimmy Buffett music, and what sounded like a full-scale party. I checked my phone. It was 9:47 a.m., which meant they'd started even earlier than the supposed community hours from Karen's fake document. I looked out my window and couldn't believe what I saw. Karen wasn't just back. She'd brought reinforcements. There were at least 15 people in and around my pool, including several I recognized from the previous week and a bunch of new faces. They'd brought a full tiki bar setup, professional-grade pool floaties, and what appeared to be catered food spread across my patio furniture. But the worst part was what they'd done to my pool. They'd brought their own decorations. Plastic flamingos, floating beer pong tables, a volleyball net, and an inflatable slide that they'd somehow attached to my pool deck. My carefully maintained, pristine pool looked like a tacky water park. This time, I was ready. My security cameras had been installed during the week, and I had multiple angles recording everything. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I walked outside. "Karen!" I shouted over the music. "What the hell is this? I called the police on you last week." She was back on her golden swan throne, this time wearing a ridiculous sun hat with fake fruit on it and oversized jewelry that looked like it came from a costume shop. She waved at me like I was a friend she hadn't seen in years. "Jake, honey, so good to see you again. I hope you don't mind, but I brought some friends to meet you. Everyone, this is Jake, our new neighbor who's still getting used to our community spirit." The crowd of trespassers waved and smiled like this was perfectly normal. One woman actually raised her margarita glass in a toast. "I told you last week that this is private property," I said, my phone still recording. "You're trespassing, and I'm calling the police again." "Oh, sweetie," Karen sighed. "I was really hoping we could work this out like adults." I checked with my contacts at the county office, and it turns out your property deed has an easement that allows community access to water features during designated recreational hours. Another obvious lie, but she delivered it with such confidence that several of her followers nodded knowingly. One elderly man in a Speedo that should have been illegal actually chimed in. "These newer developments always have those community access clauses. It's very common." I called 911 again, and this time I made sure to mention that I had video evidence of repeat trespassing by the same individuals who had been previously warned by police. Officer Martinez arrived 12 minutes later, and this time he was not in a patient mood. Karen's party was still in full swing when he walked into my backyard, and there was no way to claim this was a misunderstanding or community meeting. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, who was still floating on her ridiculous swan, "didn't we discuss this last week? You were given a clear verbal warning about trespassing." Karen's demeanor shifted immediately to victim mode. "Officer, I am so sorry for any confusion. I had no idea there was still any disagreement about property access rights. I was just trying to be a good neighbor and help integrate Jake into our community social activities." She climbed off her float with exaggerated difficulty, playing up the role of a harmless elderly woman being persecuted by an unreasonable young man. "I brought my friends here because I genuinely believed we had resolved the property usage question. If there's still some confusion about the easement documentation, I'm happy to have our HOA lawyer clarify everything." Officer Martinez was having none of it. He issued formal trespassing warnings to all 15 people and made it crystal clear that if he had to come back for the same issue, there would be arrests. "Ma'am," he told Karen directly, "I don't care what documents you think you have. This is private property. You've been asked to leave twice, and you've now been formally warned. If I see you here again without permission, you'll be going to jail." Karen nodded and apologized profusely, but I caught her shooting me death glares when the officer wasn't looking. As her group packed up their party supplies, I heard her whispering to her friends about property rights lawyers and community standards enforcement. After everyone left, Officer Martinez pulled me aside for a more detailed conversation. "Look, Jake, I believe you completely, and what she's doing is absolutely illegal. But she's smart about it. She's got these fake documents. She plays the victim when we arrive, and she's got a whole group of people backing up her story." He paused and looked around my backyard, taking in the security cameras I'd installed. "Good call on the cameras. Next time, and there will be a next time, don't call us until you've got clear video evidence of them actually trespassing. We need to catch them in the act with undeniable proof." That's when I decided to get creative. See, I'm not just any software engineer. I specialize in IoT systems, home automation, and custom hardware solutions. My entire house was already wired with smart systems that I could control remotely through custom apps I'd developed myself. If Karen wanted to use my pool so badly, I was going to make sure she had an experience she would never, ever forget. Over the next week, I spent every evening after work designing and implementing what I privately called Project Pool Defense. I researched every legal way I could make unauthorized use of my pool as uncomfortable as possible without causing actual harm. The beauty of my plan was that everything I installed was technically legitimate pool equipment that would only activate during unauthorized access. I wasn't booby-trapping my property. I was just ensuring that my pool would be very, very unpleasant for anyone who wasn't supposed to be there. Phase 1. Advanced Temperature Control. I upgraded my pool's heating and cooling system with industrial-grade components and a custom control algorithm. The new system could rapidly alternate between extreme temperatures, from scalding 105 degrees Fahrenheit to freezing 58 degrees Fahrenheit, in controlled cycles that would be deeply uncomfortable but not dangerous. I programmed it to detect unauthorized access through motion sensors and automatically begin temperature cycling. The pattern was designed to be unpredictable, sometimes hot for 2 minutes, then cold for 5, then hot for 30 seconds, then cold for 3 minutes. Anyone in the pool would never be able to adjust or get comfortable. Phase 2. Psychological Warfare Audio System. I installed a network of underwater speakers throughout the pool, connected to a sound library I'd compiled from horror movies, psychological thrillers, and infrasonic research. The system included deep, ominous whale calls that seemed to come from the depths, whispered voices in multiple languages, scratching and scraping sounds like something trying to claw its way out, children's laughter that would start innocent and become increasingly menacing classic horror movie soundtracks at volumes just below painful infrasonic frequencies that would create feelings of unease and anxiety. Random periods of complete silence followed by sudden loud noises. The speakers were positioned to create 3D audio effects, making it impossible to determine where the sounds were coming from. Phase 3. Lighting and visual effects. I replaced all my pool lights with programmable RGB LEDs and added additional lighting elements, strobe patterns designed to disorient and induce mild motion sickness, red emergency lighting that would flash, like warning signals, underwater projectors that created the illusion of large, dark shapes moving beneath the surface, lights that would randomly shut off completely, leaving people in darkness, holographic projectors that could display ghostly figures. Around the pool area, Phase 4, Water Manipulation Systems. I upgraded the pool's circulation system with additional pumps and jets, powerful jets that could create artificial waves and unpredictable water currents, underwater fountains that would spray randomly, a foam generation system using safe, biodegradable bubble solution, water spouts positioned around the pool perimeter, a system that could make the water appear to boil with bubbles. Phase 5. Environmental Controls. I added atmospheric effects to complete the experience, fog machines hidden in the landscaping sprinkler systems that could create rain in the pool area, fans that could generate sudden wind gusts, speakers hidden in trees for additional audio effects, motion-activated air horns positioned strategically around the yard. Phase 6, the command center. I set up a control room in my home office with multiple monitors showing all camera angles, system status displays, and manual controls for every element of the defense system. I could activate individual components or run pre-programmed sequences designed for maximum psychological impact. The entire system was connected to my home's AI assistant, which I programmed to provide automated responses like unauthorized access detected and security breach in progress in an ominous computerized voice. I spent 3 days testing every component to ensure everything worked perfectly and wouldn't cause actual harm. The temperature changes, while uncomfortable, stayed within safe ranges. The sounds were loud but not damaging to hearing. The lights were disorienting but not dangerous. Everything was designed to be frightening and uncomfortable but completely safe. I also upgraded my security system with additional cameras, including infrared and night vision models, and set up automatic cloud backup so that everything would be preserved as evidence. The following Saturday, I was ready. I'd taken the day off work and positioned myself in my command center with a perfect view of all my camera feeds. I had Officer Martinez's direct number ready to dial, and I'd prepared detailed documentation of my legal right to protect my property with non-harmful deterrent systems. At 10:23 a.m., they arrived. This time, Karen had outdone herself. She pulled up in a party bus, an actual rented party bus, filled with at least 20 people. They'd brought professional party equipment, a full DJ setup with massive speakers, catering tables, a mobile bar cart, and enough pool toys to stock a resort. I watched through my cameras as they unloaded their supplies like they were setting up for a wedding reception. Karen directed the operation wearing a rhinestone-covered caftan and a crown, an actual plastic tiara that said Pool Queen in glittery letters. But the most infuriating part was that they'd brought a banner. A large, professional banner that they hung between 2 of my oak trees that read, Karen's Community Pool Party, Sunset Ridge, Summer Kickoff, 2024. They were acting like my pool was a public venue, and they were hosting an official neighborhood event. I called Officer Martinez immediately. They're back, and this time it's a full-scale invasion. I've got everything on camera, including them hanging a banner on my property. How many people are we talking about? I counted the feeds from all my cameras. At least 22 adults, and they brought a party bus. This isn't trespassing anymore, it's occupation. We're dealing with a domestic violence call that's going to take priority, but I can probably get there in 30 to 45 minutes. Can you document everything until then? Oh, I'm going to document everything, I said, looking at my control panel. Trust me on that. I decided to wait until everyone was fully committed to their unauthorized pool party before activating my systems. I wanted maximum impact and clear evidence that they were trespassing knowingly and willfully. For the next 20 minutes, I watched them transform my backyard into their personal party venue. They set up the DJ booth next to my pool house, arranged catering tables on my patio, and began filling my pool with their party guests. Karen held court from a new floating throne, this time a massive inflatable unicorn that she'd apparently upgraded to since our last encounter. She was literally wearing a crown and holding a cocktail like she was presiding over her own kingdom. The DJ started playing music loud enough to violate every noise ordinance in the county. People were jumping into my pool, using my outdoor shower, and helping themselves to drinks from my pool house mini-fridge like they owned the place. That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. They'd brought their own pool chemicals and were actually adjusting my pool's pH and chlorine levels without my permission. One of Karen's friends was walking around with a test kit, adding chemicals to my pool based on their preferences. At 11:47 a.m., with 22 trespassers fully enjoying their unauthorized pool party, I activated Project Pool Defense. Phase 1. Temperature Shock. I started with the temperature system. Within 90 seconds, my pool's water went from a comfortable 78 degrees Fahrenheit to a scalding 103 degrees Fahrenheit. The reaction was immediate and hilarious. People started looking confused, then uncomfortable, then genuinely distressed. I watched through my cameras as they began lifting their feet out of the water and looking around with confusion. "Is it just me, or did the water get really hot?" someone shouted. "It's like a hot tub," another person yelled. "But it wasn't hot a minute ago." Karen, ever the queen of denial, dismissed the complaints with a wave of her jeweled hand. "It's probably just the automatic heater adjusting. These expensive pool systems are so sensitive, everyone just needs to get used to it." But I wasn't done with temperature. 3 minutes later, I triggered the rapid cooling cycle. The pool temperature plummeted to 59 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 2 minutes. The screaming started immediately. "What the hell is wrong with this pool? It's freezing! It's freezing cold! I can't feel my legs!" People were scrambling for the pool edges, climbing over each other to get out of the suddenly Arctic water. But Karen, bless her stubborn, entitled heart, wasn't ready to admit defeat. "Everyone calm down!" she shouted from her unicorn throne. "It's just a malfunction! These modern pools have glitches all the time! The temperature will stabilize in a few minutes." Several people had already gotten out, but Karen's core group of followers climbed back into the pool at her insistence. That's when I activated the next phase. Phase 2. The Symphony of Terror. The underwater speakers came alive with my carefully curated playlist of psychological warfare. It started subtly, low, ominous whale calls that seemed to emanate from the deepest parts of the pool. People started looking around nervously, trying to figure out where the sounds were coming from. "Do you guys hear that?" someone asked. "What is that noise?" another person demanded. "It sounds like singing." The whale calls gradually morphed into whispered voices in different languages, Spanish, French, what sounded like Latin, all speaking in urgent, desperate tones that I'd sampled from horror movie soundtracks. Then I escalated to full psychological warfare. Children's laughter that started innocent but became increasingly menacing, scratching sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard, and the unmistakable violins from the psycho shower scene. The effect was spectacular. Half the pool party was now standing on the deck, refusing to get back in the water. "There's something wrong with this pool!" someone screamed. "It sounds like it's haunted. Karen, I'm not getting back in there. But Karen was committed to her performance. She was still floating on her unicorn, though I could see her confidence starting to crack. It's just the filtration system making noise, she insisted. These expensive pools have all sorts of mechanical sounds. Everyone back in the pool. We're not letting Jake intimidate us. That's when I triggered the third phase. Phase 3. Lights, camera, chaos. Every LED light in and around the pool began strobing in a pattern I'd designed to be maximally disorienting. Red and white lights flashed in sequences that would induce mild motion sickness and create a sense of emergency. Then I activated the holographic projectors. Suddenly, large, dark shapes appeared to be moving beneath the surface of the water, shadowy forms that looked like massive fish or something far more sinister. The projections were perfectly calibrated to appear real, especially combined with the churning water from my circulation system. The reaction was immediate and beautiful. There's something in the pool! I saw it! Something huge! What is that thing swimming down there? People were pointing at the water and screaming. Several of Karen's guests were crying. The DJ had stopped playing music and was backing away from the pool area. Karen, we need to get out now! But I was just getting started. Time for Phase 4. Phase 4. Foam Apocalypse. I activated every bubble machine and foam generator simultaneously. Within 30 seconds, the entire pool was filled with dense, white foam that made it impossible to see more than 6 inches in any direction. The combination of alternating hot-cold water, terrifying audio, strobing emergency lights, apparent monsters in the pool, and now complete visual obstruction sent Karen's party into absolute chaos. People were screaming, falling over each other, and desperately trying to find the pool steps while completely blinded by foam. The horror movie soundtrack was still playing at full volume, and the temperature was cycling between scalding and freezing every few minutes. Karen herself was trapped in the middle of the pool on her unicorn floaty, spinning in circles and shouting commands that nobody could hear over the cacophony of screams and terror. "Everyone calm down!" she shrieked. "It's just technical difficulties. Stay calm!" But her voice was barely audible over the chaos. People were convinced they were under attack by pool monsters, ghosts, or some kind of supernatural force. That's when I decided to escalate to the final phase. Phase 5. The Water Chaos Protocol. I activated every water jet, fountain, and circulation pump in the pool simultaneously. The result was artificial waves, unpredictable water spouts, and currents that made swimming impossible. Combined with the foam, temperature changes, strobe lights, and horror soundtrack, my pool had become a literal aquatic nightmare scenario. People were crying, praying, and trampling over each other to escape. I heard one woman screaming about pool demons, and another guy swearing he'd never swim again as long as he lived. The foam was so thick that some people couldn't find the pool exit and were just splashing around in blind panic. Karen's unicorn had started deflating, and she was desperately trying to paddle toward what she thought was the pool edge. "Jake!" she screamed toward my house. "Turn it off! Whatever you're doing, turn it off!" But I had one more surprise waiting. Phase 6. The grand finale. I activated the emergency protocol, every alarm, siren, and warning system I'd installed around the property. Air raid sirens began wailing, emergency lights flashed around the entire backyard, fog machines created an apocalyptic atmosphere, and my AI assistant began broadcasting in an ominous robotic voice. "Unauthorized access detected. Security breach in progress. Emergency protocols activated. Authorities have been notified. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." I activated the emergency protocol, every alarm, siren, and warning system I'd installed around the property. Air raid sirens began wailing, emergency lights flashed around the entire backyard, fog machines created an apocalyptic atmosphere, and my AI assistant began broadcasting in an ominous robotic voice. "Unauthorized access detected. Security breach in progress. Emergency protocols activated. Authorities have been notified. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." The combination of sirens, horror sounds, foam, temperature chaos, emergency announcements, and what appeared to be a full-scale disaster scenario sent everyone into complete panic. It was like watching a perfectly choreographed apocalypse unfold in real time. The scene was absolute bedlam. People were screaming at the top of their lungs, their voices mixing with the wailing sirens and horror soundtrack to create a symphony of pure terror. Through my cameras, I watched grown adults, people who probably considered themselves sophisticated members of an upscale community, reduced to primal panic as they stumbled through knee-deep foam like survivors of a supernatural disaster. The DJ was the first to completely lose it. He abandoned his expensive equipment mid-song and sprinted toward the exit, but slipped on the wet deck and went sliding across the concrete on his stomach, screaming the entire way. His massive speakers were still blasting music, but now it was mixing with my horror soundtrack to create the most chaotic audio experience imaginable. Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville layered over demonic whispers and air raid sirens. Two middle-aged women near the shallow end were clinging to each other, convinced they were under supernatural attack. One of them kept screaming, "The pool is possessed! The pool is possessed!" while the other was sobbing and trying to pray in what sounded like half-remembered Latin from childhood catechism classes. A man in his 60s who'd been confidently grilling burgers on my patio 20 minutes earlier was now crawling on his hands and knees through the foam, completely disoriented and crying for his wife. "Margaret! Margaret, where are you? I can't see anything." Margaret, meanwhile, had made it to the pool deck, but was running in circles, unable to find the exit because of the strobing lights and fog machines. She kept screaming, "It's the end times! It's the end times!" while waving her arms like she was trying to fight off invisible demons. The catering table had been completely overturned in the chaos. Expensive hors d'oeuvres were scattered across my patio, mixed with foam and pool water. Someone had knocked over the portable bar cart, sending bottles of premium liquor crashing to the ground and creating a cocktail of alcohol, foam, and terror that was somehow both tragic and hilarious. But the most spectacular part was watching Karen's core group of supporters, the ones who'd been so confident in their leader's authority just minutes before, completely abandon her in her moment of greatest need. Brenda Kowalski, Karen's most devoted follower, was the first to flee. She'd been floating on an inflatable flamingo right next to Karen's unicorn when the chaos started. But the moment the foam hit, she rolled off her float and started swimming desperately for the edge, leaving Karen behind without a second thought. "Save yourselves!" Brenda screamed as she hauled herself out of the pool, dripping with foam and pool water. "The pool has been cursed! Karen, I'm sorry! I can't save you!" The beer gut guy from the earlier incidents was having what appeared to be a complete breakdown. He'd somehow gotten tangled up in the volleyball net I'd installed for their unauthorized tournament and was thrashing around in the foam like a whale caught in fishing nets, screaming about pool monsters and technology demons. Meanwhile, the emergency lighting system was creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Red and white strobes reflected off the foam and fog, making everything look like a scene from a science fiction horror movie. The holographic projectors were still running, so ghostly figures appeared to be moving through the mist around the pool area, which only intensified the supernatural terror everyone was experiencing. Karen herself was trapped in the center of this aquatic nightmare, and watching her downfall was absolutely glorious. Her ridiculous unicorn float, the symbol of her self-proclaimed pool royalty, was deflating slowly but steadily, causing her to sink deeper into the chaos with each passing moment. "Help me!" she shrieked, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Someone help me! I'm the HOA president! You can't leave me here!" But her authority meant nothing in the face of what everyone believed was either a supernatural attack or a technological nightmare beyond their comprehension. Her crown, that ridiculous plastic tiara she'd worn like a symbol of her dominion over the neighborhood, had fallen off and was floating somewhere in the foam, probably being dissolved by pool chemicals. She tried to paddle toward the edge, but the artificial waves from my circulation system made it impossible to maintain direction. Every time she thought she was swimming toward safety, another wave would spin her around or push her back toward the center of the pool. "This is assault!" she screamed. "Jake Morrison, this is attempted murder! I'll sue you for everything you're worth!" But her legal threats were lost in the chaos. The AI system was still broadcasting emergency warnings in multiple languages. I'd programmed it to cycle through English, Spanish, and what sounded like German to make the situation seem even more international and serious. "Achtung! Unauthorized personnel detected. Initiating containment protocols." Two of her remaining supporters finally managed to locate her in the foam. They grabbed her arms and started dragging her toward what they hoped was the pool edge, but they were as disoriented as everyone else. They kept bumping into the pool walls, unable to find the steps. "Where are the stairs?" one of them screamed. "Why can't we find the stairs?" "The pool is changing shape," the other one shouted back. "It's some kind of technological witchcraft." It took them nearly 5 minutes to find the shallow end steps, during which time Karen was alternately sobbing, screaming legal threats, and demanding that someone call the National Guard. When they finally dragged her out of the water, she looked like a drowned rat who'd been through a washing machine full of bubble bath. Her caftan was torn, her makeup was completely destroyed, and she was covered in so much foam that she looked like a rejected extra from a low-budget sci-fi movie. But the most satisfying part was her expression, complete and utter defeat mixed with genuine terror. "This isn't over," she gasped as her rescuers helped her toward the exit. This is war crimes. This is torture." The exodus was like watching a disaster movie in real time. People were abandoning everything: designer purses, expensive electronics, car keys, even their shoes, in their desperate rush to escape what they were convinced was either a supernatural attack or some kind of military-grade assault. The party bus driver, who'd been waiting in my driveway, saw the foam-covered refugees streaming out of my backyard and initially refused to let them on his vehicle. It took several minutes of hysterical explanation before he was convinced to open the doors. "Just drive!" someone screamed as they piled into the bus. "Drive before it follows us!" "Before what follows you?" the driver asked in confusion. "The pool demons. The technology ghosts. Whatever's in that water!" The bus pulled away with people still hanging out the windows, some crying, some praying, and at least one person who appeared to be having what looked like a religious awakening. I could hear them screaming and sobbing even after they turned the corner and disappeared from view. Officer Martinez arrived 16 minutes later to find my backyard littered with abandoned party supplies, puddles of foam dissipating in the afternoon sun, and absolutely no trespassers in sight. But I had 57 minutes of comprehensive 4K video footage documenting everything from their arrival to their panicked evacuation. More importantly, I had crystal-clear audio of Karen acknowledging she knew she was trespassing, admitting she'd lied about property rights, and directing others to commit crimes on my property. Officer Martinez watched the footage with barely contained laughter. "This is the most thorough documentation of trespassing I've ever seen. We've got breaking and entering, theft of services, property damage, conspiracy, and about 15 other charges." "How many people can you identify?" I asked. "At least 18 adults clearly visible on camera, all participating in criminal activity after being previously warned. And we've got your neighbor on recording admitting she knew this was illegal." Within 3 hours, Karen and 15 of her accomplices were arrested at their homes. The other 3 had apparently left town immediately after the pool incident, which only made them look more guilty when police tried to locate them for questioning. The arrests made the local news within hours. Someone had posted shaky cell phone footage of foam-covered people running screaming from my neighborhood, and the story went viral on social media. The headline in the local paper was, "HOA President Arrested in Elite Neighborhood Pool Scheme." Karen immediately tried to play the victim, claiming she was the target of a vicious assault and that I'd booby-trapped my pool with dangerous devices, intended to cause physical harm. She hired a lawyer and threatened to sue me for everything from assault to intentional infliction of emotional distress. She claimed that my pool defense system was illegal, that I'd caused psychological trauma to innocent community members, and that the whole thing was a premeditated attack designed to humiliate her. But her lawyer quickly discovered what I'd known all along. Everything I'd installed was completely legal. The temperature control system was standard pool equipment that stayed within safe operational ranges. The sound system was just audio speakers playing music and sound effects. The lights were normal LED pool lights with color-changing capabilities. The foam was the same biodegradable bubble solution used in children's bath products. The water effects were standard pool jets and fountains. Most importantly, none of my systems activated until motion sensors detected unauthorized access to my property. I could demonstrate that everything worked normally when I used the pool myself. The defense protocols only engaged when trespassers were detected. My lawyer, David, had an absolute field day with Karen's case. Not only did I have video evidence of her repeatedly trespassing after police warnings, but she'd also committed fraud by creating fake legal documents, organized criminal conspiracies, and harassment. The best part, David told me, is that she's claiming emotional distress from the consequences of her own criminal activity. She's essentially arguing that you made trespassing too unpleasant, which isn't a legal complaint. The case went to trial 3 months later, and it was a complete disaster for Karen. The prosecution played my security footage in open court, showing her directing multiple people to trespass on my property, using fake documents to justify criminal activity, and ignoring repeated police warnings. The judge was particularly unimpressed with Karen's claim that she was the victim. "Mrs. Morrison," he said during sentencing, "you organized multiple criminal acts against your neighbor's property, ignored law enforcement warnings, and then complained when your illegal activities became unpleasant. This court finds your behavior both criminal and absurd." Karen was sentenced to 6 months in jail, suspended to probation, fined $15,000, and ordered to pay restitution for my legal fees and property damage. She was also permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position and required to take anger management classes.